Chapter 1 of To Have and to Hold. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Recording by Tom Weiss. To Have and to Hold by Mary Johnston. Chapter 1, in which I throw emphasis. The work of the day being over, I sat down upon my doorstep, pipe in hand, to rest awhile in the cool of the evening. Death is not more still than is this Virginian land in the hour when the sun has sunk away, and it is black beneath the trees, and the stars brighten slowly and softly, one by one. The birds that sing all day have hushed, and the horned owls, the monster frogs, and that strange and ominous fowl, if fowl it be and not, as some assert, a spirit damned, which we English call the whippoorwill, are yet silent. Later the wolf will howl and the panther scream, but now there is no sound. The winds are laid and the restless leaves droop and are quiet. The low lap of the water among the reeds is like the breathing of one who sleeps in his watch beside the dead. I mark the light die from the broad bosom of the river, leaving it a dead man's hue. A while ago, and for many evenings, it had been crimson, a river of blood. A week before, a great meteor had shot through the night, blood red and bearded, drawing a slow fading fiery trail across the heavens, and the moon had risen that same night, blood red, and upon its disk there was drawn in shadow a thing most marvellously like a scalping knife. Wherefore the following day being Sunday, good Mr. Stockham, our minister at Weyanoke, exhorted us to be on our guard, and in his prayer besought that no sedition or rebellion might raise its head amongst the Indian subjects of the Lord's anointed. Afterward, in the churchyard, between the services, the more timorous began to tell of divers portents which they had observed, and to recount old tales of how the savages distressed us in the starving time. The bolder spirits laughed them to scorn, but the women began to weep and cower, and I, though I laughed too, thought of Smith, and how he ever held the savages, and more especially that Opechancanough, who was now their emperor, in a most deep distrust, telling us that the red men watched while we slept, that they might teach wiliness to a Jesuit, and how to bide its time to a cat crouched before a mouse hole. I thought of the terms we now kept with these heathen, of how they came and went familiarly amongst us, spying out our weakness, and losing the salutary awe which that noblest captain had struck into their souls; of how many were employed as hunters to bring down deer for lazy masters; of how, breaking the law, and that not secretly, we gave them knives and arms, a soldier's bread, in exchange for pelts and pearls; of how their emperor was for ever sending us smooth passages; of how their lips smiled and their eyes frowned. That afternoon, as I rode home through the lengthening shadows, a hunter, red brown and naked, rose from behind a fallen tree that sprawled across my path, and made offer to bring me my meat from the moon of corn to the moon of stags, in exchange for a gun. There was scant love between the savages and myself. It was answer enough when I told him my name. I left the dark figure standing, still as a carved stone, in the heavy shadow of the trees, and spurring my horse, sent me from home the year before by my cousin Percy, was soon at my house, a poor and rude one, but pleasantly set upon a slope of green turf and girt with maize and the broad leaves of the tobacco. When I had had my supper, I called from their hut the two Paspahegh lads bought by me from their tribe the Michaelmas before, and soundly flogged them both, having in my mind a saying of my ancient captain's, namely, "He who strikes first ofttimes strikes last." Upon the afternoon of which I now speak, in the midsummer of the year of grace 1621, as I sat upon my doorstep, my long pipe between my teeth and my eyes upon the pallid stream below, my thoughts were busy with these matters, so busy that I did not see a horse and rider emerge from the dimness of the forest into the cleared space before my palisade, nor knew until his voice came up the bank that my good friend, Master John Rolfe, was without and would speak to me. I went down to the gate and, unbarring it, gave him my hand and led the horse within the enclosure. "Thou careful man," he said with a laugh as he dismounted. "Who else, think you, in this or any other hundred, now bars his gate when the sun goes down?" "It is my sunset gun," I answered briefly, fastening his horse as I spoke. He put his arm about my shoulder, for we were old friends, and together we went up the green bank to the house, and when I had brought him a pipe, sat down side by side upon the doorstep. "Of what were you dreaming?" he asked presently, when we had made for ourselves a great cloud of smoke. "I called you twice." "I was wishing for Dale's times and Dale's laws." He laughed and touched my knee with his hand, white and smooth as a woman's, and with a green jewel upon the forefinger. "Thou Mars incarnate!" he cried. "Thou first, last, and in the meantime soldier! Why, what wilt thou do when thou get'st to heaven? Make it too hot to hold thee, or take out letters of marque against the enemy?" "I am not there yet," I said dryly. "In the meantime, I would like a commission against your relatives." He laughed, then sighed, and sinking his chin into his hand and softly tapping his foot against the ground, fell into a reverie. "I would your princess were alive," I said presently. "So do I," he answered softly. "So do I." Locking his hands behind his head, he raised his quiet face to the evening star. "Brave and wise and gentle," he mused. "If I did not think to meet her again, beyond that star, I could not smile and speak calmly, Ralph, as I do now." "'Tis a strange thing," I said as I refilled my pipe. "Love for your brother in arms, love for your commander if he be a commander worth having, love for your horse and dog, I understand. But wedded love, to tie a burden around one's neck because 'tis pink and white, or clear bronze, and shaped with elegance, faugh! Yet I came with half a mind to persuade thee to that very burden," he cried with another laugh. "Thanks for thy pains," I said, blowing blue rings into the air. "I have ridden to day from Jamestown," he went on. "I was the only man of faith that cared to leave its gates, and I met the world, the bachelor world, flocking to them. Not a mile of the way but I encountered Tom, Dick, and Harry, dressed in their Sunday bravery, and making full tilt for the city. And the boats upon the river! I have seen the Thames less crowded." "There was more passing than usual," I said, "but I was busy in the fields and did not attend. What's the lodestar?" "The star that draws us all, some to ruin, some to bliss ineffable. Woman." "Humph! The maids have come, then?" He nodded. "There's a goodly ship down there, with a goodly lading." "Videlicet, some 80 waiting damsels and milkmaids, warranted honest by my Lord Warwick," I muttered. "This business hath been of Edwyn Sandys's management, as you very well know," he rejoined with some heat. "His word is good, therefore I hold them chaste. That they are fair I can testify, having seen them leave the ship." "Fair and chaste," I said, "but meanly born." "I grant you that," he answered. "But after all, what of it? Beggars must not be choosers. The land is new and must be peopled, nor will those who come after us look too curiously into the lineage of those to whom a nation owes its birth. What we in these plantations need is a loosening of the bonds which tie us to home, to England, and a tightening of those which bind us to this land in which we have cast our lot. We put our hand to the plough, but we turn our heads and look to Egypt and its flesh pots. 'Tis children and wife, be that wife princess or peasant, that make home of a desert, that bind a man with chains of gold to the country where they abide. Wherefore, when at midday I met good Master Wickham rowing down from Henricus to Jamestown, to offer his aid to Master Buck in his press of business tomorrow, I gave the good man Godspeed, and thought his a fruitful errand and one pleasing to the Lord. Amen." I yawned. "I love the land and call it home. My withers are unwrung." He rose to his feet and began to pace the greensward before the door. My eyes followed his trim figure, richly though sombrely clad, then fell with a sudden dissatisfaction upon my own stained and frayed apparel. "Ralph," he said presently, coming to a stand before me, "have you ever £120 of tobacco in hand? If not, I have the weed," I replied. "What then?" "Then at dawn drop down with the tide to the city, and secure for thyself one of these same errant damsels." I stared at him, and then broke into laughter, in which, after a space and unwillingly, he himself joined. When at length I wiped the water from my eyes it was quite dark, the whippoorwills had begun to call, and Rolfe must needs hasten on. I went with him down to the gate. "Take my advice, it is that of your friend," he said, as he swung himself into the saddle. He gathered up the reins and struck spurs into his horse, then turned to call back to me: "Sleep upon my words, Ralph, and the next time I come I look to see a farthingale behind thee." "Thou art as like to see one upon me," I answered. Nevertheless, when he had gone and I climbed the bank and re-entered the house, it was with a strange pang at the cheerlessness of my hearth, and an angry and unreasoning impatience at the lack of welcoming face or voice. In God's name, who was there to welcome me? None but my hounds and the flying squirrel I had caught and tamed. Groping my way to the corner, I took from my store 2 torches, lit them, and stuck them into the holes pierced in the mantel shelf, then stood beneath the clear flame and looked with a sudden sick distaste upon the disorder which the light betrayed. The fire was dead, and ashes and embers were scattered upon the hearth. Fragments of my last meal littered the table, and upon the unwashed floor lay the bones I had thrown my dogs. Dirt and confusion reigned. Only upon my armor, my sword and gun, my hunting knife and dagger, there was no spot or stain. I turned to gaze upon them where they hung against the wall, and in my soul I hated the piping times of peace, and longed for the camp fire and the call to arms. With an impatient sigh I swept the litter from the table, and taking from the shelf that held my meager library a bundle of Master Shakespeare's plays, gathered for me by Rolfe when he was last in London, I began to read. But my thoughts wandered, and the tale seemed dull and oft told. I tossed it aside, and, taking dice from my pocket, began to throw. As I cast the bits of bone idly, and scarce caring to observe what numbers came uppermost, I had a vision of the forester's hut at home, where, when I was a boy in the days before I ran away to the wars in the Low Countries, I had spent many a happy hour. Again I saw the bright light of the fire reflected in each well scrubbed crock and pannikin. Again I heard the cheerful hum of the wheel. Again the face of the forester's daughter smiled upon me. The old gray manor house, where my mother, a stately dame, sat ever at her tapestry, and an imperious elder brother strode to and fro among his hounds, seemed less of home to me than did that tiny, friendly hut. Tomorrow would be my 36th birthday. All the numbers that I cast were high. "If I throw ambasas," I said, with a smile for my own caprice, "curse me if I do not take Rolfe's advice." I shook the box and clapped it down upon the table, then lifted it, and stared with a lengthening face at what it had hidden, which done I diced no more, but put out my lights and went soberly to bed. Chapter 1. Recording by Tom Weiss, Tom's Audiobooks.com